Hello and welcome to the Outcast. I'm your host, HC, and with me are.
Wolf.
And Jaya?
And today, everybody's Kung Fu fighting because it took us a bit, but we're finally covering the Kung Fu Panda movies. And it totally has nothing to do with the fact that there's a new Netflix show coming out next week, and we are kind of prepping for that. Nope, no connection whatsoever.
Indeed. What could
Wink,
give you the idea?
wink, wink. But before we actually start talking about these movies, I just want to point out that Kung Fu Panda is totally the Hades town for Shark Tale's Turn of the Dark. Because what are the chances we have another animated remix movie with Jack Black and Angelina Jolie? Only one's bad and one's good.
Yep.
Shark Tale is the bad one, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, Shark Tale. I think that
It's
was when we were questioning what exactly DreamWorks was thinking.
They made Shrek 2 in the same year. How do you do that?
Apparently different animation crews, because if you have different directors and
Different
different budgets,
everything.
and
Different everything. Different, like, was Jeffrey Katzenberg high for one of them when he signed up on anything? But whatever, we're not talking about Shark Tale. We're talking about the good DreamWorks with Jack Black and Angelina Jolie. We're talking about Kung Fu Panda, that trilogy. And I
it,
guess maybe sprinkle in some of the shows if we have anything to say, but focusing on the movies. So I guess before this, how were you first introduced to Kung Fu Panda? Jaya, what's your stance?
it's actually kind of a funny story. I don't know if either of you guys remember the CEO Blockbuster.
We remember.
So this was a time when over the winter holidays, in the transition between high school and college, my brother and I, we would sometimes rent movies from Blockbuster. And one weekend for Thanksgiving, we decided to get Wally, and for some reason he got Kung Fu Panda. And naturally, Pixar was on top of the thing. And we thought,
Yeah.
okay, this is going to be a dumb movie that won't mean anything to us. And Wally is going to be the one that makes us cry like Up. Or we fall in love with like The Incredibles or Ratatouille.
I want to say you said Wally will make you cry like Up, even though Up wasn't released yet, or was it?
I I think Kung Fu Panda was before. Was it before or after How to Train Your Dragon? Because How to Train Your Dragon was
It was
2000.
before. No, because that's the thing though, that Kung Fu Panda and Wally were both 2008 and Up was 2009. So that's
Okay,
why.
then like The Incredibles or Ratatouille then.
That's fair. Okay.
But to our shock, we got a little frustrated with the end of Wally.
Mhm.
We felt that it didn't really match the expectations it had set out for this tragic sci-fi. And we thought,
And
okay, Kung Fu Panda, this is going to be a dumb comedy. We're going to laugh. We'll return it, and we'll be like, we'll agree to never watch this again. That ended up not happening because sure, it does start silly, but then Tai Lung escaped from prison, and that was
yeah.
when that scene was the part that made us sit up straight and watch more closely because we went, oh, this is actually a theory. This is a movie that actually is serious. It treats
Yeah.
its enemy like a legitimate threat and gave him the best scene to boot. And so after that, we got emotionally invested in the movie, and we agreed it was better than Wally in terms of entertainment. Sorry, Pixar. Though actually
Yeah.
not that sorry, considering what has come out recently.
Well, considering you can like something for being more entertaining. Wall-E is a great movie, but it's more artistic.
Right. But it's
But
also
okay,
the fact that,
that's just for introduction. We'll
right.
talk about the movies themselves in a bit. But so, Wolf, what was your introduction to Kung Fu Panda?
Oh Lord. I don't. I guess I just watched the film. I think. Man, how did I get introduced into this? I honestly, I don't remember. Old man moment.
Oh, okay.
I feel like I want to say my first introduction was we mentioned it briefly, was with actually the show, I think, Legends of Awesomeness. I think that's when, like, oh, this is a thing, huh? I'll watch an episode or two. It's like, this is interesting. And then I found out basically the same thing I did with How to Train Your Dragon. I watched the show first a little bit, and it's like, oh, there's movies. I'll check them out. And then did, and I was like, oh, all right. Second one, or first one, pretty cool and, neat and everything. Then second one was like, okay, they went hard. All right, I'm way more interested now. And then the third one came out
The
and
rest
saw
is
that.
history?
Yeah.
Okay. So, kind of like Jaya, I have a funny story to say about this because you are not ready. I was introduced to Kung Fu Panda thanks to a video game ad for the game based on the movie, which was aimed in a forum I was in. Didn't see that one coming, did you?
No, not
But
at all.
like, I just saw this and I'm like, somebody made a game about the panda that does. I said, okay, you know what? I saw this ad and I'm like, you know what? I'm wikiing this. I need information. And so I wikied it and I found out that it's actually a movie. And the video game is based on this movie called Kung Fu Panda. And even in middle school, my cynical teenage mind was like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever heard of. What was Ninja Turtles taken? Wait a minute. Okay, lame jokes aside, sounded ridiculous. But I was kind of interested with the fact that I saw that Jack Black was the panda, and I'm like, maybe it will be self-aware enough to be funny. Maybe like that's the joke. So one day, near the end of the school year, there was no real school going on. So I said, you know what, fuck it. It's close to summer vacation. I'm being bullied. I need a laugh. I'm gonna watch this movie. Ended up being way better than I expected. That was, I think, the moment when I realized this was going to be different was the scene where we see Tai Lung's backstory, and when Tiger said Shifu had to fight what he created, and as he's like launching at Tai Lung, he just has this flash of the baby Tai Lung coming to hug him, and he's like, "But how could he?" This was the point where I'm like, "What is this movie? I came in to have a laugh, and you're actually attacking my emotions. What is this?" And yeah, the rest was history. And now I guess we're going to talk about the rest of this history by actually talking over the films themselves. We're gonna jump around and obviously spoilers in case you haven't seen Kung Fu Panda for whatever reason. So kind of not. What's your favorite from the trilogy? Mine is two. Two is my favorite.
Excuse me. Yes, 2 for me is the best one of the 3.
Mm-hmm. Wolf?
I'm gonna go against. No, it's the second one. Like, I think a majority of people will say the second one.
Yeah, like it seems to be like this kind of general consensus that 2 is the best one.
I mean, it's a simple fact, right? They came out with the first one. It was good. There was nothing wrong with it. But the second one, it seems like, all right, we need to do
everything.
Yeah, they upped everything. We need to do all of that, but better now, and they achieved that.
How did Kung Fu Panda 2, starring Jack Black, gets me to cry every time during that damn flashback scene? Could never tell you. Actually, I could tell you because it's good storytelling, but they actually put effort into it. So now also kind of a thing, favorite villain from the trilogy?
Ooh.
Tai Lung.
Tai Lung, okay. Well, what do you have to say?
I think for me, it's I would say Lord Shen. I think Lord Shen edges out above the other two.
Okay.
It'd be very close, like between Lord Shen and Tai Lung.
I really want to say Kai because of J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons is moi, but I have to give it to Shen. Though all three of them are great, do not misunderstand me. All three of them are great, but I think Shen has Shen is kind of the perfect middle ground between being serious, and actually threatening, but also managing to get a good comedy out of him. So I like that.
I think
Mhm.
Shen also is my preference because there's more of a connection to Poe there than what
Yeah,
Kai
he's the
or Tai
one.
Lung had. Tai Lung and Kai felt like they were, Shifu and Uguay's kind of
Yeah,
enemies
they were.
in their own sense
Yeah,
as
they were.
well.
And also, like, Paul is the most personal interaction with Shen compared to the other two. The Tai Lung and Kai, he only meets 2 seconds before they start fighting, in the final fight.
Mm-hmm.
With Shen, he has a lot more encounters. So it's more interesting. But yeah, so I have to ask though, even though I love all them, Jaya, why Tai Lung? What makes him your favorite?
First off, I will say a lot of people are torn about if Shen and Kai are shallow, and I disagree. Especially Kai, as you mentioned, is probably the funniest of the three villains because he actually leans into Poe's silliness at times
Yeah.
and actually appreciates if someone can get a hit on him. But I think with Tai Lung, it's because he had to set the expectations for the trilogy. Unlike a certain shark we could name, who we don't remember, and I don't even know what the name was the big bad shark mobsters in Shark Tale.
Oh, is it better that I know the name? I know who you're talking about. I know his name.
Right, but
So
you get my point. No one remembers the shark villain. We don't talk about him like we don't talk about Bruno.
we don't talk about Don Lino. You know what? I want that song. Somebody get on it. Give me that song. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
And so Tai Lung basically had to show, okay, DreamWorks actually does mean business. They know how to tell a story. And so you think he's just going to be a goofy villain, given the tone, because we're spending a lot of time with Poe and
Yeah.
his desire to watch Kung Fu, if not to be a part of it. And then we see this creature trapped in a tortoise shell and being stomped on and all.
Yeah.
I think what struck me is that Tai Lung's completely serious. There's nothing comical about him. He's certainly dry, like when he thanks the goose messenger for coming and saying, I thought I had been forgotten, and tells them the real dragon warrior is coming.
And also, he has this kind of cynical edge to him, like when he meets the Furious Five, and he's like, "So where's the Dragon Warrior?" And like he's standing on the rope of the bridge, like so calmly, and so like his comedy comes from the fact that he's cynical, not because he's a goofball necessarily.
And also that he's a bit dramatic. Like I do wish the movie had talked about the fact that he and Tigress are technically siblings, and but they never really talk about that.
Well,
because sibling fights, trying to be the dragon warrior and impress Shifu.
Yeah. Speaking of that, speaking of that, can we agree though? The scene when he escapes, holy shit! If I need to just pick one scene to show how awesome the action in these movies is, just show them this scene. The rest they can figure out, but like choose this as an introduction because holy shit! Can we also talk about the fact that the guy escapes prison with a feather? He releases himself with a feather.
Yeah, he releases himself with a feather. And you can tell something's going to happen with the feather because because for context, for those who haven't seen the movie, the goose has been sent as a
If they
messenger from...
haven't seen the movie, they should have probably closed the video because we're in the spoiler section and everything is a spoiler. But yeah.
Yeah, but basically the prison warden affectionately knocks the goose on the back and sending a feather flying from the top of the prison. Yeah. And it finally is at the end of the scene in front of Tai Lung and in a place where he can reach it. Mm-hmm. So he escapes with a feather and then he uses all of the defenses meant to keep him locked up to escape. Like when they shoot crossbows at him, he angles so that they hit the chains and his shackles, which leads to a hilarious shot of the Rhino Guard who fired, looking
Yeah.
horrified and going,
Actually, something that I really want to point out with these movies, I'm not sure if you noticed, but a lot of the times the animals actually have the actual animal growls as part of their they actually use the growls to imitate their sounds when they are trying to be intimidating and stuff. It actually works super well.
yes. And meanwhile, the goose gives a little squeak because he's
Yeah.
being forced to witness.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not getting paid enough. I need a better union. So
Another version of the Dragon Warrior,
yeah.
and Mongo's very incredulously, and he's like, "Our battle shall be legendary."
That became a meme, and I'm so happy it's a meme.
It did, but it's a really hilarious build-up when he finds out who Poe is, and we actually hear Tai Lung actually being wisecracking. He's like, "He's a
yeah. So this, but I like that he's just like he punches them, and Poe actually hits a pole, bounces right back, and takes the scroll. Like just perfect. This is comedy, people. This is slapstick 101.
Yeah.
People need to study this. By the way, Wolf, you've been quiet. Anything you want to add to
No,
this?
just letting you guys go on about Kung Fu Panda. I have nothing
you
to
are
add so
part
far.
of the you are a part of the podcast. You must have something to say
about the first film.
Yeah.
Again, like the first film, I thought was good, right? But there was nothing there that I think really like. Yeah, I'm in this, right? For me, it was all right. This was fun. This was enjoyable, but nothing really caught me, right?
Okay. Like it was a good
Personally,
movie. You enjoyed it, but it didn't grab you to like. I'm like a big fan of this. It's like I said I like it.
Yeah.
But
it was the second one that really grabbed me personally. Again, that's not to say the first one is bad. Don't get me wrong. It's just it didn't grab me yet.
That's fair, because it took a while for the crew to figure out their voice, which I think in Kung Fu Panda 2, they were better at figuring out how they wanted to strike the tune. And you can hear it in the soundtrack as well.
This is something I want to talk about. When in doing production, a lot of the times they were actually considering make it a full-on parody, make it a full-on comedy, and like fuck the emotional stuff, fuck the actual martial arts thing and stuff. And later on they figure out, you know what? No. We need to actually make this legit kung fu movie. Like we can't just make it a comedy. We need to actually talk about this. We need to actually have some drama and emotional impact in here. A change which I appreciate. It did the movie wonders. And also, apparently, in earlier drafts, Poe was a joke, supposedly. And I don't think the movie would have been as half as endearing if he was a joke.
No.
Well, he is a joke. It's just he's a joke with the character.
A joke, not a joke. A joke.
Yeah. I was a bit worried because I don't know if you remember the first teaser of Kung Fu Panda.
I went back to see it, and I'm like, how in the heck? Who was the marketing agent? Who was the copywriter who did this? You missed the movie.
Yeah. For those who don't know, it was Jack Black demonstrating his knowledge or lack thereof of Kung Fu before talking about the movie. And I love Jack Black. Like, I was a generation that saw School of Rock. But even I agree, that's not a good way to make a good first impression.
No, like again, I kind of went into the movie thinking, oh, Jack Black voicing a panda, so it's gonna be somewhat funny. But this teaser doesn't sound like a good start.
It's going back to like early to mid 2000s DreamWorks. They just had no clue how to market their films.
They don't have a clue. Like, there was I didn't see any marketing for How to Train Your Dragon, and so I thought it was going to be another dumb green film. So this is quite typical.
if I may actually talk about it, I remember seeing one of the trailers for How to Train Your Dragon 1. And those who know me know that I completely hated this trailer to the point I wasn't even sure I was even going to see the movie. What convinced me was the good reviews. So
A lot of people who I've talked to who saw those early trailers for How to Train Your Dragon was like, yeah, this did not represent this film at all.
no, no.
It does not.
Just a small tangent, but here's the thing. Hiccup goes da da da. Well, dead in the trailer. Oh my god, this is so stupid. What is DreamWorks doing? They gave us so many great things. This is what they're doing now. You see the movie. Da da da. Well, dead. This is amazing, and I love this kid.
Well, it's also funny because you get more context. Because Toothless imitates Hiccup, rolls his shoulders, and it makes a similar sound before walking off.
And not only that, in the trailer, they edited, like, when you see Astrid running away before Hiccup says it, in the trailer, they edited her going, "You're in so much trouble," before he says it. And it's funny when she says nothing, because then he's just kind of stating the obvious. Like, yeah, he's saying you're in so much trouble and that we're dead is kind of the same implication. Just thinking.
Yeah, I feel like by the second movie, and we're not talking about the third movie, they understood what they were trying to say, and that they managed to strike the right balance between heart and humor. So mainly because they just let Toothless be funny. And so...
Meanwhile, I just want to bring us back to Kung Fu Panda because we have an entire podcast about How to Train Your Dragon.
So they did know how to do marketing. You know, there was a McDonald's ad where two kids fight over a chicken dumpling, and I've been trying to find it, but then Jackie Chan, who plays Monkey in the movie, stops the fight and makes them share it. And so that was their...
I'm sorry, but by the way, what was the point of casting Jackie Chan as the monkey? What was the point?
Lines?
But it's like he says nothing. At least in the first two, he barely says anything. Only in the third movie actually gets, more than 5 lines.
I mean, to be fair, most of the Furious 5, other than Angelina Jolie, get very few lines.
Yeah, but you know what? I just remember them saying stuff. I remember what they sounded like. People are like, "Oh, Jackie Chan voiced the monkey," and I'm like, "Does the monkey even talk?"
Right, and especially if you grew up on Jackie Chan adventures, like,
oh god, take it back.
I remember the show. I remember the show you're talking about. I barely watched it, but I know what you're talking about. It's that animated show where halfway through the opening, he's just alternate between his animated self and his real self for whatever reason.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Voiced by SpongeBob in the Hebrew version. No, I am not kidding.
What? Goodness, Israel's voice acting community is super talented.
Yeah. That was the shocking bit of the day. So another two interesting things about Kung Fu Panda regarding the first movie. I kind of find it funny that China actually called to ban this movie. They didn't want anything to do with it. They thought it was a disgrace when it was announced. And after it came out, they were like, "Why can't we make movies like this celebrating our own culture? This is amazing."
In their defense, the last movie that came out that was a big hit about China was Mulan. And I love Mulan for Tit Fast. Yeah. And you agree it's not historically accurate, and they can't decide what time period they're setting it in. So it's
and 2 years before Kung Fu Panda, there was Mulan 2. Let's not forget about that little nugget.
Oh God, I received that. I received the bootleg of that as a gift, and
all I'm going to say, Wolf, since you love hilariously terrible movies, you need to watch Mulan 2. That's all I'm
I've seen that.
Say.
It's great.
No, you don't want to watch it.
Oh, I've
the
seen
singing
it.
is so terrible in it.
No.
Like,
it's
wonderful.
Jaya, it's great. It's great to laugh at. That's all I'm gonna say. It's great to laugh at because it's so terrible.
Great to laugh at, but it will hurt your ears to hear the song.
It's terrible. But I it's I love it. It's watch
I
the first
showed
watch
this
Mulan
movie.
and stop there. But if you like bad movies, Mulan 2,
No,
honestly,
listen,
I love it.
I showed Mulan to our friend Haddock, and the amount of laughter could not be explained, which went on when we were watching it.
I'm
Fun
not
fact: there
surprised.
is a mock film of Kung Fu Panda. I don't know what it's called,
That's the
but
other thing I want to say. That for some reason, that like you know those mockbusters, you know those fake animated movies that are trying to trick you into thinking it's the major blockbuster. Kung Fu Panda has so many of those. So many Kung Fu Panda ripoffs. It's actually its own genre.
yeah, and
And one
sometimes
of
you
them
have.
is the rabbit for some reason.
Well, I guess rabbit makes sense. There are canonically rabbits in Kung Fu Panda. I mean, I
Yeah,
do
but
want to see the Christmas special because there's a chef in it that Poe dishonors, and so tries to get Poe to kill him
yeah,
for his honor.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. That's actually pretty funny. The rabbit one gets me though because the other ones are just you have a panda on the cover, so I can see how a confused grandma would confuse it. But Kung Fu Rabbit,
What?
it's not even the same animal. How what were you trying to achieve here, studio?
Maybe a Watership Down sequel?
Oh my God, can you imagine? Can you imagine Watership Down and Kung Fu Panda together at last?
I think that would be I mean, that might have been the sequel. We still haven't seen the reboot with James McAvoy.
All right,
And so, of
that's the
course,
thing. Let's
yeah,
say I think these are two different universes to actually combine together. Then again, we mentioned Shark Tale in this episode, and that's a Finding Nemo and the Godfather crossover, which what we always wanted.
yeah. Even the comic strip Foxtrot made fun of it. It's basically about an American family named Fox, and Jason, the youngest, is the nerd and trying to get rich. When Finding Nemo comes out, he tries to make his own computer animated film, and he calls it Finding Hemo, about a
Oh
leech
my God.
trying to find his son. And his brother says, "You can't do that. It's a total ripoff of Pixar." And he says, "So?" And Peter says, "So? That's DreamWorks turf." And Jason goes, "Good point. I hate to make them mad."
That's actually something somebody tried to sue DreamWorks over the fact that they stole Kung Fu Panda from him, and eventually it turns out that he actually frauded his evidence. So fuck this guy. And Wolf, thank you for linking me a whole list of
Yeah,
the. So let's see. So we have
it's on
Chop Kick
screen now too,
Panda.
so our listeners can see. Chopkick Panda,
Oh,
the legend of Kung
Kung
Fu
Fu.
Rabbit.
Yeah. Panda Warrior and
Oh,
Panda
God.
Fighter. Like, so I think Shopkick Panda and Panda Fighter are the two that people could confuse with it the most, you know, because they have eyes. But
What?
either way, um. So anyway, Kung Fu Panda comes out. It's surprisingly really good. It's a hit. We are moving on to the sequel. I was actually on the hype train for this
How
one.
the hell did
Me
the
too.
Adventures of Panda Warrior get Rob Schneider or
Because
Norm
it's Rob
Macdonald?
Schneider. The standards are not that high, Wolf.
I,
It's the same.
fair,
It's the guy who voiced Gnome of the North.
What?
That's
fair,
all I should say.
fair, fair.
Okay, anyway. So, but Kung Fu Panda 2 is different because the first Kung Fu Panda.
I'm sorry. Just kind of jumping the gun a bit. You know what was Kung Fu Panda's 3's competition in the box office when it came out? Gnome of the North.
I don't even remember that movie.
I
I
don't
haven't
either.
even seen it. I have just watched reviews on YouTube, and I feel like that's all I need.
I
I
know
am
it came out.
completely.
I knew it was a thing, but it's like, oh yeah, don't remember it at all.
I know it was a thing, and I know that they made a sequel, which was actually two movies in one.
You know what? At some point, you have to ask why it's animated. And this is why animated films can't be consistent. You get these golden ages and then you get dark ages. And
Yeah.
the people who, like us, who like animation get disappointed. And then we wait for Gravity Falls to revive our faith in the fact that animation can be good. Until we find out
Alex
the
Hirsch is
SMC that will
Alex
allow Ryan
Hirsch is our savior. Bow before Hootie, but
Listen,
that's for
listen.
another thing.
Well,
Just
actually, no, Kung Fu Panda doesn't have any rhymes about there once was a man from Kentucky because no one in China knew about Kentucky.
Yeah, that
but
is true.
listen, the only thing you need to do, right? You'll never be disappointed in animation again. All you just be a weeb, just watch anime always, and become disappointed for
I
different
beg to
reasons.
differ. If you never saw a basketball player, a basketball anime,
Mm,
you'll hear the very end ranting about how this isn't accurate and how it does not make sense.
Yeah,
So,
my
you know,
response
you
to
could.
that, no comment.
yeah.
I
Which
respond
is,
to you by not responding to you.
yes.
I'm not even gonna dignify that question with a response. Scrooge McDuck, 2013. Okay, but back
But,
to Kung
no,
Fu
Kung Fu
Panda
Panda
2.
2, which by
I
this
Yeah,
they figured
go ahead.
out what they were doing. Because Kung Fu Panda 1, as you said, there were times when they seemed unsure if they were going to make this a straight comedy or a Kung Fu movie with comedic elements. And Kung Fu Panda 2, they said, we're going to do an actual serious Kung Fu Panda film with funny moments. And they lean
Yeah,
into it, you can tell, because the opening's much sadder than the
and it's
opening to the first
also
Kung Fu Panda.
continuing the story. Thank you.
Yep. Right,
because
because,
because in any other movie like this, they would be like, yeah, you know, Poe saved the day, but the Furious Five still could still kind of see him as a loser who jibbed them. But no, they are actually his friends in this movie, and they actually have combos together. And Poe is learning more in his technique, and he's actually a more skilled fighter. And I believe legit that him and Tigress are good friends because she actually
yeah,
cares about them and stuff. It's like,
yes,
what development in my animated movies? Get out of town. What is this?
yeah. And then there are some characters in good movies who never changed, like Rough Nut and Tough Nut in How to
Well,
Train Your Dragon.
that's because they're comic reliefs. So, yeah, no, what can you do?
And yes, I will be sad forever that that shot of them actually looking sad was cut from How to Train Your Dragon too, because you needed that.
Um, they do still have it, I think.
No, you know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
That shot.
I need to be reminded. Remind me after this. Anyway,
But
so
oh,
for
we
Kung
get
Fu
the
Panda,
narration of a peacock named Shen who
yeah.
discovers fireworks, but
Mhm.
also might be a little tyrannical. So a soothsayer that his parents consult say that unless he changes his path, a warrior in black and white will be the cause of his downfall. And this could either refer to pandas or snow leopards, which Tai Lung is. And there is a theory that the reason why Tai Lung was orphaned was because of Shen's
Hmm.
campaign.
Oh, I never heard of that. That's actually really clever. That's smart. I suppose that's a really good theory.
It is because Shen is black and snow leopards are black and white, a little
Mhm.
washed out. But long story short,
The
it does a
Tai
Dark
Lung
Lord
is a bit
thing,
more gray, but that's a good point. That's a good point.
literally and metaphorically. But
Mhm.
because Tai Lung, you could argue, is just selfish, but
Yeah.
Shen is actually a killer. And he
Mhm.
proves it by wiping out a village of pandas nearby, and
Um.
but gets exiled for his troubles.
Yeah. And after he actually goes after this, and after them, he comes home, and his parents are actually very frightened of him, which ends up with him being exiled, and he ends up conducting plans for, as it says, the year of the peacock, in which he's going to destroy Kung Fu
Yep,
with
he's gonna launch
cannons.
a campaign against China with the
Mhm.
power of the cannon.
Yeah.
As The Simpsons would
Um,
say, cannon is like excellent comedic relief.
Yeah. And by the way, to show how great Shen is with comedy, I love the scene where they put the cannon in, in the room, and he's like, "Can you move it a bit to the left?" And it's like, "Is it really that necessary?" I imagined this. I imagined this moment since I was a kid, and I imagined it a little to the left. They move it a little perfect. Now
Yeah.
actually, you know what? This is not right. Move it a bit out to the other side. Uh,
There's
it,
also interactions with the soothsayer, whom the guards found, and who apparently is implied to have been a sort of a parental figure to Shen.
yeah.
And he tries to get visions from her, but she responds by stamping on his foot and eating his robe.
Uh, and on that note, Gary Oldman's performance, just
Yeah.
considering he voiced two terrible villains in also. Have any of you seen Quest for Camelot?
I wanted to see it as a kid, but mercifully I never did.
I think I
Well,
So
have.
I didn't be disappointed in pseudo Disney.
it's Warner Brothers desperately trying to be Disney. But all I'm gonna say, Gary Oldman as a villain in that movie
No,
should
I've not.
never. You are both lucky, and that's
No,
all
I
I'm gonna
have seen
say.
this. I remember I had to look up
Oh
an
no.
image now. I have definitely seen this film.
But like, listen, Gary Oldman plays the villain in that, and his voice for the villain is so off balance, and the villain itself sucks. But like, you put him in a villain here, a villain that's actually written well and sophisticated, and you direct him in the right way, and he's brilliant. He's just
He is.
like the way he's like whispering like that. But even but then when his voice actually cracks and he needs to shout and everything, it still works. And
Does.
also like the balancing of tones in this movie is fantastic because you have
It
this
is.
you have the backstory scene where Poe finds out about his past and he finds inner peace. That scene still gets me. It's still one of the saddest scenes in animation history, maybe even movie history. And then after this, you get that scene with him coming back and he's trying to yell to Shen, and because he's so far away, Shen can't hear him. And he goes, "What?" And they
What?
actually try to communicate with shouting, and it's great. How can you
Mhm.
balance that?
Yeah. In general, Poe's interactions with Shen are rarely great at balancing those tones. Like, he imagines that Poe will be coming in revenge and prepares this very dramatic speech. But before he can
Yeah,
start it, Poe entirely says,
and
hey. And you
yeah,
get the punch on Shen's face as he says, hey, back.
Something you
yeah,
mentioned briefly
And
earlier that I want to call back to as well, real quick, is the music in the second one, like the soundtrack.
yeah.
yes,
And
You said
the
Zimmer
before
music,
they
is
really found
it,
their voice with the second movie, and I agree,
they
because you
did.
can really they really nailed like the themes for all the characters, like Shen and Poe and others in this one especially. I think,
mhm.
or at
And
least this one they started
also
to.
again with using the animation medium to their advantage, like in any other movie, if you saw a group of characters, like let's assume the non-flying Avengers, let's say, because it's technically live action. I know there's CG in it, but there's live action. If you saw
Right,
if you saw some of the Avengers like running up a building that's collapsing, you'll be like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous. I know they're superheroes, but they're literally running up a building that's collapsing. But in here, it
yeah,
works because it's animated, and you can be creative and over the top with it, and they do it in
right.
cool ways.
Right, and they also establish stuff. Like, they established that Poe and the Five have become really good at working as a team,
Yeah,
and it's also suspenseful because it turns out Shen is not a typical movie villain. Poe and the Five assume he just has one cannon. If they destroy it, it'll be
yeah.
done. And
No, but
then
he has a lot. He has a
I
lot.
like Mantis' response. Like, he's actually chipper, despite the fact that they have 20 cannons pointed at them. Oh no, he's got lots more. And And
That's something I
so
want
they
to point
real
out. I forgot to point that out. Seth Rogen is getting a lot of shit for doing the same, but whenever he's talking in these movies, there's
he's
something funny
hilarious.
about hearing his deep voice coming out of that little thing. So I like
Yeah,
it. I just like Seth Rogen in general. I think he's funny, but
right.
I
And
get that
the fact
his pick
he
is not for everyone, but here it works.
another thing, the movie is good at using previous Chekhov's guns because it's mentioned that Poe has action figures of the five, and his dad helps pack some of his favorite ones for this trip. Like Mr. Bing's a
Aw.
whole other topic later on,
We'll
but
get to him. I want to talk about him.
yes, because Mr. Bing is the MVP of the whole trilogy, and no
Yes,
one's
that
changing
is.
my mind about it. But basically, there's a bit where Shen's second in command, the Wolf Boss, manages to lure Poe and the Five into a trap. After
Yeah.
the Rich House was actually my favorite scene in the movie for the music and the comic timing.
Yeah,
And
like
we
the
also
scene where
iconic line
when they are fighting across the street, like kind of like Fast and the Furious, but with animals. Yeah, that's great.
yeah, but also because the humor is great. Because Wolf Boss is also hilarious when he's like, "This is like fighting a big fluffy cloud," and Poe actually gets a great line. This cloud's about to bring the thunder, and makes him hit a
Yeah.
bunch of times. And then Wolf Boss does the same to him and starts cackling.
Yeah,
And Poe asks,
people,
"Why aren't
so
there so
many
many
signs.
signs?"
By the way, Wolf, you're apparently a part of the villains in this movie. What was it like to film it?
Haha.
Yeah, I know. I had to get it out. I'm sorry. Checks in the mail.
But yeah,
Thank you.
basically, Poe has to surrender. But while they're being shackled, he says, "Don't forget this little guy," and does sleight of hand with Mantis, putting his action figure of Mantis in, and allowing
Yeah.
Mantis to fall. And it's actually really clever that briefly allows them to get the upper hand in Shen's palace.
Yeah. And actually, there's a point there where Poe tells them that he has a plan, and Tigress replies with, "I hope it goes better than the plan to cook rice in your stomach." And it's like, what is that in context? I want to know the context for this. I need a short film to explain it to me.
I don't
Somebody.
know. We've got Legends of Awesomeness varied in terms of episode quality, so maybe it's best if we don't know.
No, like it doesn't have to be one of the episodes. Just I need this somebody from the crew tell me what was that intel. Like what was the thought process behind that line? I must know.
Yeah, but overall, it's a great movie. And as Wolf mentioned, they figured out their voice, and you can hear it in the soundtrack as well. The opening riffs for Kung Fu Panda 1 are much more goofy, in the sense that it's dramatic, but more of a faux dramatic. That they know they're parodying Kung Fu movies. But this one, it's actually
But
when you
also,
listen.
actually, another thing I really love, and I need to bring this up, otherwise this podcast won't be complete. I think best final fight in the trilogy.
Mm-hmm. Best
Wolf says
final fight.
nothing, so he agrees.
No, which fight? To be clear.
The one where Poe is facing the cannons and he starts firing the cannons at them.
I agree.
Yes, that
Right.
is an awesome.
And I think that scene in particular embodies Kadoosh as a badass world, no matter the context. And
It is.
so much that there was actually a YouTuber, a YouTuber LP, and he since quit. His name was Kabanamani456, I think. He started saying skadoosh whenever he plays games and he's doing something cool because of that movie. So there you go.
Oh God, he did that during Cuphead, especially the
Sadly,
DLC.
I think he quit before Cuphead came out, but I'll let you know. By the way, you know something? Now that you mentioned that, Mantis going, "Oh no, he has way more than just one cat." That's probably a reaction to like a Cuphead playthrough. That's like, "Oh, I beat the boss." Oh no, it's continuing.
Yeah.
Okay, Cuphead for another day. For another day, go play the DLC if you want a delicious last course. Anyway, back to Kung Fu Panda 2. So, and again, casting Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he says nothing in the movie. What is what is their damage? I
He
just
speaks.
want to
Croc
ask.
speaks.
Yeah. So
Croc
we,
speaks.
you go.
Like, but he says like what, 2 lines?
Yeah, very little, but he does speak.
He gets
Which
some funny lines.
granted, yeah, which
Like-
granted, I know letting Jean-Claude Van Damme talk is a very controversial move in its own, but you hired the guy.
Yeah, there is one funny bit where they're going to the local town's prison to rescue some kung fu masters, and Monkey says, "I'll make it sound like Crane does caca." And after a while, they're
when did you ever hear me say that?
yes, but then Monkey doesn't let out the signal as a wolf boss and pose like Monkey, and Monkey looks at a very meek caca.
I did love the scene where it's just Poe trying to get both of the masters out of the jail cell.
And it's like,
You'll
portal.
never get me out of the cell. Already out of the cell. He's like, dadgummit. Again,
Yeah,
like the
but-
second one has some great
all I
comedy
mean,
elements to it.
Yeah, but I just want to say, like, again, going back to if whoever gets it, but like I needed Jean-Claude Van Damme to go, Shen, you're off the air. Nobody got it. Okay.
sadly, I don't know all of Gary Oldman's repertoire.
No, it's a Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's from the Street Fighter movie where he knocks the bad guy out of the air, so he goes.
Yeah, I'm sighing at you. I'm sighing at you. I
You
sigh
know
in
what
your
I'm
general
referring-
direction. I love that film,
okay.
and I still sigh at you.
I haven't
Honestly,
seen Superman, so I don't have a horse in this race.
This movie sucks, but
Oh, it's
again, like
awful.
Mulan 2, like it's like Mulan 2. It's,
No, it's
bad,
worse.
but it's fun to laugh at.
It's way worse than Mulan 2, but you'll love it. If you love bad
yeah,
films.
I
Ow.
know, but
Could
just
it
to
possibly
give you,
be worse than Mulan 2?
Oh, it's worse.
well, believe me, Jaya, you can do worse, and you've seen movies that did worse. Remember Rockadoodle? Yes. Anyway, back to.
How dare you? Rockadoodle was terrible. I believe you convinced me to watch that.
I convinced you to watch it because all I had with it was a nostalgic memory of me liking it because I was a stupid kid at the time.
No, you're a smart kid. You were just lured in by bad marketing.
Not marketing. I rented this at a DVD store, but okay, whatever. We'll discuss it later. Back to good animation. Kung Fu Panda 3?
Yep, and the one that does actually give an ending to this trilogy, and that's why I don't
like. Oh, sorry. I just want to mention real quick about Kung Fu Panda 2. Like, it's not said enough, but I do love the softer moments, and especially like seeing very close to the end, right when Poe comes back and he has that conversation with Mr. Ping, his dad. It's so great.
Yeah.
It's probably one of my personal favorite moments of that movie.
Yeah, actually, when he tells them, I figured out who I am, and he tells them, I'm your son, and they are, the feels, the fucking
like
feels.
I said, Mr. Ping is the MVP of the whole trilogy, and the third movie emphasizes that, but we'll have to do a whole section about him, because it's a long arc.
Yeah, we will, all I'm going to say is that there's a character I want to do a whole section of, but we'll get to it. Another thing about Kung Fu Panda 2, real quick.
Yes.
So, there's the point where Mr. Ping tells Poe that he's adopted, and Poe is like, I knew it. And then he tells Tigress the thing, and Tigress is like,
your dad.
And she's like, that must have been quite a shock. And he goes, yeah. And it's like, you literally said that you knew. You knew.
Well, it's one of those things, like, you know, but having, like, you suspect, but having confirmation. Also, that flashback is so cute. And I think it showed Mr. Ping a good guy at heart, because he sees a baby in his radish crate, and he's considering leaving, but then the baby starts crying, and so his first instinct is to bring it inside, feed it, and bathe it.
Yeah. And
he says, I'm just
again.
You and never letting go of you. And I'm like, okay, this scene encapsulates. But we can go into that when we talk about Mr. Ping later.
Yeah,
I do also scene where he sees Po off, and Po's worried about Kung Fu and his identity crisis, but Tigers can see that Mr. Ping's upset.
Yeah,
That
she
this
actually reassures them. That
will be,
scene actually, when she tells him, "Don't worry, he'll be back before you'll be able to say noodles," and he actually goes noodles, like he already wants them back. It's oh,
and you can tell, and especially, I also appreciate how modest Po is, which is something I dislike the TV shows did, is by making him occasionally arrogant. If I like in the shows, in this movies, he's still pretty modest. He gets his dream, becomes the Dragon Warrior, but he goes and helps his dad at the restaurant. He ends the movie by helping his dad out with a customer, like he's never left. And especially when you think in the beginning, he said he didn't want to work in the noodle business forever. But now that he has his dream, he basically does it because it's how he can spend time with his dad, and it's like, ah. And on that note, so Kung Fu Panda 2 ends with a panda meditating in a village with rice in a rice field and says, "My son is alive." And we find out that he is Po's father, played by Bryan Cranston.
Well, actually, in 2 for that one line there, it's actually Fred Taylor show. It's Bryan Cranston for the third movie.
Yeah. Fred, you would have been a great lead.
So before this, because between 2 and 3, there was the Legends of Awesomeness TV show. I've only seen a few episodes, didn't really care for them much. But the theme song kind of slaps.
Well, it is because Jack Black sings it.
Yeah, is it him? Because I wasn't sure if it's the guy they got to voice Po in the actual show, or if it's actually Jack Black.
Let me double check. It does sound like him. It sounds exactly like something he would sing, especially for those of us who grew up in school rock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the thing, that it sounds like, being a fan of Tenacious D, it does sound like a song he would sing, but I'm not sure if the guy can just do a good imitation of him singing, because in the show itself, he doesn't, he sounds distinctly enough, if it makes any sense. But Wolf, you said you were actually introduced to Kung Fu Panda through the show. What are your thoughts on the bits you've seen?
Oh, it's been a long time since I've seen the show, unfortunately. But I remember liking it. I thought it was fine. You could tell that it wasn't the movies, right? Like they had definitely aged everything down, and it was more focused on just kind of episode of the week style stuff. There wasn't a lot going on to it, but it was fun enough.
I think bringing How to Train Your Dragon up again, I think the same problem I kind of had with the first few episodes of Riders of Berk initially kind of plagued this show from what I've seen, and that it's like, oh, you have the characters from the movie now on some episode of the week wacky adventures, and it's like, and it doesn't have the same weight, but dragons got there eventually. You need to sit through it, but eventually got there. From what I've heard, though, Legends of Awesomeness doesn't really go anywhere in its runtime. It's just, it's just a thing.
I will say, to its credit, Riders of Berk actually acknowledged that Hiccup adding the dragons causes both economic disruption and social disruption. Episode 2 is about Gobber having an existential crisis on realizing his services as a blacksmith are no longer needed.
And you know something? The reason I compare this is because one of the episodes I've seen is about the guard of the prison, which held Tai Lung. Now the Tai Lung is just dead, supposedly. Then his prison has no purpose, and he needs to find a new purpose. And it's like, yeah, this is what I want to see in a Kung Fu Panda show.
Right, that's a great episode. And it also shows, though,
but that's the thing, though. It works better in How to Train a Dragon, where there's a society established, there's a town, there are people there. In Kung Fu Panda, these are the world building is great, but this is not the thing that you're necessarily thinking of. It's like, for this guy, he has no purpose. He can go and retire. Enjoy your life, dude.
I don't remember the episode. He came to the Valley of Peace to find the Dragon Warrior and get revenge on him. And Po,
what the fuck would you want revenge on the guy who who destroyed the biggest threat, and the guy who
That's what
basically
Poe
gave him
asked
shit,
as well. Poe even
yeah,
asked,
and
because the guy doesn't know he's a dragon warrior, and Poe feels bad and decides to give the guy a job at his dad's noodle shop and teach him to control his temper. But it backfires because even though the guy finds out he's the dragon warrior,
yeah,
he then proceeds to be an ungrateful bastard, and kicks Poe's butt, also takes Mr. Ping hostage. And so
and
the
there
whole
you go. It's
and the
like
five
fuck
call
you,
out
dude.
Poe, saying there are some people that you can't reason with, and being nice to them will only backfire.
Mm-hmm.
Because he also
Well,
told he also told this guy their weakness. Ironically, Gongman Prison ends up open again with Beast Rhino as the first inmate.
yeah, but I think
But yeah,
the other thing that's gonna happen is because the show is a mid-quel. It takes place between the first and the first and second movies,
Mm-hmm.
and granted, Race to the Edge is also a mid-quel if you want to go
yeah,
with that route. But I think,
right.
regardless of what you think of Race to the Edge, and I know Jaya has some objections to it, but
I have objections on principle. The first season is great,
I
but
will
if it's going to
say,
go a little
though
anti-Semitic later on,
the reason though I think Race to the Edge, the Dragons show in general, Cartoon Network and Netflix show seasons together. I think the reason it works better is because it actually has its own identity in the franchise, and I don't think Legends of Awesomeness has that from what I've seen.
no.
Maybe
But
it
it's
changes,
the other
but
thing. Because, as you mentioned, the five become great friends with Poe, to the point that Poe knows Tigress's noodle order by heart in the third movie, and
yeah.
asks if she has changes very politely. The
Mhm.
show, not exactly like that. They're all kind of jerks to each other.
Yeah, I
And there's,
remember saying one that like apparently tigresses can have fun. It's like, yeah, that's a stereotype.
yeah, though I do like the image. There's an episode where Shifu sends the five to a spa so he can test Poe. And
Yeah.
apparently, and Tigress mentioned she got them kicked out of the spa, and I'm like, I wanted to see that subplot because I would want to see.
Yeah.
Ants don't like water. Would she need a happy hoodie?
Yeah.
You know.
Oh my God.
Well,
I hope that they trimmed the murder mittens before that. Whoever gets it, gets it.
Grow with the Dogs grooming Tigress, YouTuber that does short videos of grooming her clients, and will provide
Yeah.
very dry commentary
Uh,
on their varying
Wolf,
comfort and distress.
Wolf and listeners who don't know it, YouTube Girl with the Dogs. You'll thank us later.
I've seen it.
So, oh, good.
Yeah,
So, Kung
but
Fu
yeah,
Panda
Tigress is more of a
3.
Loki or
No, she would be afraid, though. She's afraid. I, that's for later, though. We can
yeah.
talk about the
So
crossover
yeah,
potential. So,
that's the
Kung Fu
problem you
Panda.
mentioned. With Riders of Berk, at least, it
Mhm.
had one thing, is at least before it started going off the rails, is it showed the consequences of Hiccup being an impulsive little shithead, which he is, because he snarks to his enemies, he has a big mouth, and he doesn't think things through. And Race to the Edge, to its credit, actually had Hiccup face this. When he finds out that Dagger's going after an Indiana Jones death trap, he's like, I'm gonna go set off all the traps and get this treasure. And we immediately see why that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
And so,
Well,
Riders of
but
Berk also had hilarious moments. And it had Mark Hamill playing Alfred the Treacherous. But because
yeah.
Cartoon Network couldn't show a grown man beating up a child, we alas never got to see the same rivalry they have in the books. And Mark Hamill,
Oh, yeah. What can you do? So,
well,
Kung
okay, I
Fu.
mean, they
If it's
basically cast,
okay, we need to move this along. So, if it's okay with
Kung Fu
you,
Panda 3, it starts with Oogway in the spirit realm, which, if you realize
I'm
on a
glad.
rewatch of the
I'm
first
glad we got to
movie,
see Gray again. By the way,
yeah,
it was great to see him again.
and not as a fake ghost as he was in the TV show. There's an episode where they think his ghost has come back, but but basically, it's confirmed Oogway used the Wuxia hold to send himself to the spirit realm, and why is actually hinted at. But when he's there, an old friend named Kai comes, played by J.K. Simmons, who proceeds to beat him up, reveals he's gotten several other Kung Fu masters in the spirit world, including Tai Lung, if you look closely.
Oh,
And
really? Because
yeah, you can see Tai Lung in one figurine.
I was totally going to joke that when Poe and Kai fight at the end of the movie, Tai Lung is just chilling there in the background watching, and it's like, yeah, I had this, he went easy on me, and it's apparently no, I didn't notice that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, Kai uses Oogway's chi, the natural energy that flows through everyone, according to. I mean, I'm not sure what the philosophy would be. Apologies, and I don't want to say it wrong. But it's the idea that we all have energy within us that we can tune into for harmony, and he uses it to escape the spirit realm back to Earth. I think this should be a problem. Except, and unfortunately, Kai's egotistical. He's stumped by the fact that no one knows who he is. And they keep saying, well, who are you?
Yeah.
And
I like the two that like see him as soon as like, I'm Kai, then Swell of Spirits, and then he goes, oh, okay, I used to work with Uguay. And it's like, oh, Uguay, yes, we know Uguay. And he's just getting pissed at them. You know something? Guy wants actually, Kung Fu Panda 3 credit, Jackie Chan actually gets to say things.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you for that movie. And they give him some hilarious lines. But in the meantime, the main plot is this Shifu decides to retire so he can go meditate in the cave and understand the power of chi, and he puts Poe in charge of teaching the five. Which hilariously is wrong, as Poe accidentally creates a level 0 for the five.
Yeah. Wolf, you want to say something?
Well, I love the theme for Kai, right? Like his theme tune. That
I like that. Ding, 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 ding,
I don't know
ding,
the instrument, yes, but it's very iconic, I guess you would say. Like you instantly know that theme, I feel, once it starts playing, because you know who it's for, especially if you're very interested in this movie, I think. And again, it just goes back to, I think the third film, like it gets a bit of a bad rap because for a few different reasons, but I think one of those reasons is it just came after the second film, which was kind of unlucky for it, because I do think the third film is really good.
Yeah. I think it's also the fact that, because the second one was so emotional and stuff, and I think I'll give this to 3. 3 is the funniest. I think. Like it has a lot of jokes in it. Most of them land like perfectly, but I think that coming out of the second one, which really managed a balance, and then go to the third one, which is mostly comedy, this is probably what kind of maybe turned people off in some way.
And I'm curious,
but I still really like 3 because it still has emotional moments that really hit.
I'm curious to hear both of your opinions on a question I have for you. I'm of the opinion that it shouldn't have been a trilogy, that they should have stopped at the second film. That you shouldn't ignore like the ending of 2 where you see his dad, like, oh, my son's still alive. That doesn't happen. You don't see that. You see the second film and you get the ending there, and that's where it ends. You don't get the third film. What is your opinions on that?
I, in all honesty, disagree. I think 3 really was the final piece of the story which was needed because essentially, and I didn't talk about this when we covered the first one. I want to save it to the end because I think it really sums up the entire thing. But this trilogy is essentially Poe's journey. It is a coming of age in a sense. And I think without that third movie, without that final piece, with him actually figuring out a lot of things, and I will get to it, then the movie wouldn't have felt complete. After the third one, I feel the story is actually complete.
Okay. Your opinion, Jaya?
So if we were talking about How to Train Your Dragon, I would have agreed. And just end it at movie 2. We'll just pretend they'll do what the books did and make it an actual friendship of a lifetime.
I disagree. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But I think I would have agreed because for some reason third goals rarely worked as well.
Mm.
But Kung Fu Panda 3, to its credit, knew that it had a lot of shoes to fill and standards to meet because it had to end the trilogy. And again, this is why I'm so mad they're making 2F and spin-offs, because I think it's an ending. As we mentioned, Poe's journey is figuring out who he is and what is his purpose in life. Movie 1 was about him gaining the confidence to be the Dragon Warrior, to actually figure out how am I going to put in the work to defend the valley and fulfill this promise Uguay made him take, to at least try. Now movie 2 is about his identity crisis, figuring out who he is in the face of finding he's a genocide survivor. And movie 3 is, who am I now that things have changed, that Shifu wants to retire, and thinks that even though he sets up Poe to fail, which he really admits, and Sinlesson's even had an accurate point, when Poe asks, why did you set me up to fail? And Sinleson says, because it's funny. But it's also the fact that Poe isn't quite sure where he stands in life, because mostly he's fighting bad guys, but he doesn't want to be fighting bad guys all the time. And if he's going to teach people to be their best self, he has to figure out, how am I a teacher? And I feel like in terms of closure, we think Poe's able to reconcile his identity, being adopted, but also having a panda family, being a kung fu warrior, but also being someone that wants peace. Because Poe might be good at fighting, but throughout the trilogy it shows he's a lover, not a fighter. In that, he will fight, and he thinks Kung Fu is awesome and will comment on technique, but he's not someone that craves violence, say the way that Kai does. He's someone that deeply cares about others and wants to protect them. And I feel like this arc could, and that's why it felt so important that it concludes with Poe teaching Kung Fu to the entire valley, not to teach them to defend themselves, as he did with the panda villagers, but so they could all have that same journey of enlightenment that he has had along the way, that he's spreading a gift that he received, and that is his purpose, to spread the gift.
That's another thing why I think the third movie is so important for this, is that in the first movie, Shifu understands that he can't teach Poe like the rest of the five because he needs to, turn Poe's weaknesses into strength and not treat it as a weakness because he's not like the five. And in the third movie, Poe learns the same thing about the other pandas, and he understands that I can't teach them to become what I want. I need to play into their strengths, and that's how he wins. That's how he gets the army against Sky. And essentially when we come to the fight in the spirit realm, if you notice, there is kind of a theme with the villains, especially asking Poe, "Who are you?" And people asking him, "Who are you?" And when he says the Dragon Warrior, then he treats it as a title, as this is something that was given to him, so he needs to live up to that. He earned the name, he needs to live up to it, but he doesn't necessarily learn what it means. Then when he gets to that fight and Kai asks him, "Who are you?" he says, "I've been asking myself the same question." And then the reason he is the Dragon Warrior connects to what he learned in the first movie. Not like there isn't anyone that's like him. There isn't anyone who is like a son of a panda, a goose, a student, and a teacher. He's the only one that's all of them because of what he experienced and what he went through in his life. And I feel like without this piece there, the entire point of the franchise and the entire point of this character would have just gone. So
That's
this is why
exactly.
I think that movie is. So I'm sorry, Wolf, but your idea is wrong.
That's fair.
If movie had sucked, if movie 3 had sucked and didn't have a solid story, I probably would have agreed with Wolf. Because they did stick the landing. And I actually did agree with Wolf before Kung Fu Panda 3 came out, because I felt they weren't going to be able to match that tragic backstory.
Mm-hmm.
But because they actually do it.
Interesting. Before I talk about the interesting thing, Wolf, what do you have to say now that you have our side?
That's fair. I still, I feel like the third film doesn't continue the story of, or like, like, like you said, right? You have that first question of establishing who he is, the second question of, him trying to figure out who he, like him. The first question is, him becoming the Dragon Warrior and proving that to everyone, and then the second movie kind of establishes the question of who am I. I don't feel the third film does a well enough job of establishing a new question of like the final piece of the puzzle. I don't feel like I feel like it drops the ball slightly in regards to,
It's not as
what
strong
is
as
that
the
final
second
piece?
one.
Yeah,
But
I think the second one
That I agree
ends
with.
so well and establishes and answers its questions so well that I personally, even though this is not a shot against a slight against the third film. It is a very good film. I just feel they dropped the ball somewhat in establishing and answering a new question that completes the puzzle for his journey and everything. And so I do wonder, right, if they hadn't have come out with it, if Kung Fu Panda as a duology would have felt more complete. And personally, I do think it can, but I do get where you're coming from.
But not having the three movies, I think we needed the third one. I feel like the
That's
third one
fair.
is like
That's absolutely fair.
really is where I needed it. But now to the interesting part, I'm not sure if you've heard this, but after the first Kung Fu Panda movie came out, Jeffrey Katzenberg stated that it was envisioned as a six-part story.
Right, that's what I thought it was 5 parts, but I just checked. It was going to be 6, and maybe that's why it feels
And
incomplete. Is that it would have
but
been
that's the thing.
parts?
That's the thing, though, that when three came out, and if you ask me if they finished after three, I'd be like, I'm cool with this. I'm cool with this ending
Yeah.
here. And also, like the directors of the third movie said that they really aimed to finish things up with the third one, and they're not rolling out a possibility of a fault or something, but they are basically just talking. We feel like this was a good place to end for now. If we have another idea, we'll do it. And while I think the third one is a good finish, I also like it's not like, let's say it's not Toy Story 3, we don't need a fourth.
Oh god. The fact that Toy Story 4 exists is just rare.
We have an entire podcast about it, check it out. But going back to it, I wouldn't personally oppose a fourth movie, but also I'm good with this stopping with the third one. I think it was a really good finish. And another thing I want to point out regarding it, the little details in this movie, which you may not notice, really make it work as a continuous journey, because in the first movie the idea of Poe fighting Tigress is ludicrous. Like there's no way. In the second one he tries to get past her and he keeps failing, and in the third one when she tries to tell him, you killing yourself over training for Kai to arrive ain't gonna solve anything, he actually manages to go toe to toe with her for a bit.
Right.
He actually, it's such
friendship.
a little thing. Yeah, obviously they're friends, but like just those little touches to show, like the movie doesn't really bring mention to any of this. It's just showing you that it gets better the more the more he keeps doing this. And then in the third, and also in the third movie, in the third movie, when when he activates like the super mode, if you notice the things he's wearing and like the clothing he has are exactly the same clothing he has in the opening scene for the first movie. That's
right,
such a good
of being a
detail.
great Kung Fu master.
Yeah, and it's such a cool detail that like otherwise you wouldn't notice, but it works. It's like they put thought into this. Thank you, DreamWorks, for making this stupid idea and actually more than solid trilogy. How did they do that?
Agree. It does help that, and that's another thing how Tigress and Poe's friendship works, because the directors mentioned that guys don't talk about their feelings the way girls do. And so, Po can only talk about his feelings when he's fighting, even though he's obviously a softie and a marshmallow when he's not doing kung fu. And so that's why he and Tigress's meaningful conversations happen when they're sparring, either for fun or seriously. And I think I appreciate that Tigress was sparring with Po to help him let off steam after finding out his dad didn't know about Chi. So yeah, that's the whole thing. Is Po has to learn about Chi to defeat Kai when the latter sends some jade zombies, as Monkey puts it, along with Po, to send a message, a threat, and to say he's coming. And so they decide that Po has to go to find out what Chi is. Because Shifu, as he points out, can only produce a little bit, and he'd need 20 years meditating in a cave to achieve that. And Poe's dad, who just came into town and just saw the son he thought he lost in a genocide fight monsters and getting his butt kicked live, and says, if the panda village knows about Chi, then I can teach Po, and takes him to this village.
That's another thing, that now Uguay chosen to be the dragon warrior makes a whole lot of sense, because he met that panda tribe. He knows that they know Chi and the warriors of black and white. It makes perfect sense. It tied that loose end. What the hell?
Also a case of gratitude, because the backstory reveals that Uguay was actually once a villain, which that was actually shocking, finding out Uguay was once not a good guy. But he got injured in battle, and Kai took him to a nearby panda village for help, and they used Chi to heal him. And this caused Uguay and Kai to go down two different directions. Uguay, who was grateful about them saving his life, reformed and decided to become a warrior of peace. But Kai was struck by the power that Chi could give and decided to try taking it. And that's why Uguay banished him to the spirit realm, because he thought you shouldn't attack people that saved your life. And so part of the reason why Po is chosen is because Uguay wanted to atone for that moment where his former friend and his brother in arms ended up betraying the people that helped them. And that's even what he says, when he and Po actually have a talk in the end, where it seems Po has banished himself to the afterlife forever, and Uguay tells him, well, you can try to go back, I've never tried. But he explains that Po was his way of thanking the pandas for saving him all those years ago. And it makes a lot more sense, because you do think it was just an accident. But it would be awkward for Uguay to explain, actually, I was a bad guy, and this is
And that's actually something that goes back to something Uguay says in the first movie. There are no such thing as accidents.
Right. It is interesting, though. We also do get a nice callback, a hilarious one, because you remember the scroll that would make the dragon warrior strong enough to defeat Tai Lung ends up being blank. And so, Shifu, when they realize they don't know who Kai is, Shifu goes into the archives in the Jade Palace. And he's like, oh no, this is blank. And everyone's like, not again. But then someone notices, this is the other side of it. And so Shifu flips it over, and he gives a big sigh of relief. Because he's like, I think he would have killed Uguay in the spirit realm if it had been blank again.
Yeah. That's another thing. So now that we kind of covered the three movies, I do want to say the thing with the Dragon Scroll. Back in 2008, how many of you just thought that Po is gonna open that scroll up, and that would like turn him into this magical warrior who knows everything, and then they throw in this twist that it's blank. There's nothing there. Nothing is there. Everyone, and they just try to evacuate the village, and Shifu decides to stay and fight Tai Lung. However it ends, and then there's this entire talk with Mr. Ping, who tells Paul like the ingredient of the soup, and he tells him that there's actually no secret ingredient. It's just who you are. It's like if you want to make something special, you just have to believe it's special. And this doesn't only, account to Poe's character, that, there's nothing special about him necessarily, or that he's the best kung fu fighter ever. It's just that it's just him. It's his passion. It's his willingness to keep going and not give up. It's everything surrounding his history and what he has done and what he will do that makes him the Dragon Warrior. And in the sense, it also explains why this trilogy is so damn great, because we've seen movies like this. We've seen, the traditional summer animated movie with all the colorful cartoon characters who have celebrity voices. We've seen plenty of those by
Yep.
2008. But what makes Kung Fu Panda work is that you can tell there was passion in there. You can tell that the people really wanted to make this movie, that they really cared for every little detail about it. So when it comes to that, there's just so much about this team, about these movies, that's so wonderful, and I think all three of them like nailed it on the head with that idea.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think so too. And it did bring My Little Pony to mind about how it's always a new magical artifact in the reboot. And it's like, yeah, at some point, friendship isn't going to just save everything, though we would want it to. But I think it's also because of the
Yeah.
film, it probably would have been disrespectful to unlock a new power. Because everything that Poe unlocks is established in the film: inner peace, the ability to move through life so calmly you don't disturb a raindrop, or chi, is a huge fundamental. If you look at it, it is about a huge fundamental aspect of concepts like Confucianism and such, I think. And feel free to fact check me if I'm wrong.
And mild spoilers for Stranger Things season 4, but I know Wolf's side because we did a podcast about it last week. Go watch it. But Wolf, tell me the scene in Kung Fu Panda 3 where they save Poe by telling them what he helped them realize that they are, isn't like when Mike shouts motivational things at 11 near the end. Tell me it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. There, I told you.
Wow.
Right into that one.
But yeah, I'm thinking other moments. I mean, the Ghost of Molly McGee recently had a non-kung fu example of this in the episode HC and I saw. Basically,
this
for
is
reasons, Molly's family is in trouble, and she tries to hide it from everyone because she's believing if they stay happy, this isn't a problem. And obviously, and obviously, and it eventually comes out that everyone tells Molly in the town comes to help. And her best friend Libby actually says, "You weren't very good at hiding it," and which is like savage but true. But they talk about how Molly had given so much that it was their turn to repay the favor. And also, do you want Ghost and Molly McGee?
This is a show we didn't really talk about in here, but maybe we'll get to it at some point. But yeah, that's another good example for it. But with everything kind of have any of you seen the Path of Destiny show? I know it exists. I haven't got the chance to see it.
I have not, but I was reading it. It seems like it follows like Poe and him. It's more of him being a teacher again, and him teaching like 4 other new pandas who absorb the spirit power of some old kung fu warriors, and he has to teach them how to use their new powers. It's interesting, seems neat, but I have no clue. I've not seen it personally.
You know what? Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
The only reason I'm excited for the new show that's coming out next week and we are going to cover is because they actually got Jack Black to reprise Poe. So that is interesting. That's interesting, and it makes it feel like a more continuous, like a lot more canonical, quote unquote. Not
No
to
respect
not
for
to this
James
and the
Hong
other show.
continuing to reprise his role as Mr. Ping.
No, no. This is a great honor. Like, actually, if you want to talk about Mr. Ping being the MVP of this franchise, this is another reason. He's the only one that voices his character in every part of the franchise.
Lucy Liu did too, almost. Like she
Almost, yeah,
she was almost the voice in everything for Viper.
yeah, that's true as well. But not in everything like James Hong was. So yeah. But before we
Mm.
talk about Mr. Ping, we barely touched upon him. But I want to to dedicate a section for him because he's my favorite character in this franchise, Shifu. I love Shifu. Shifu is amazing.
Yes.
Shifu is
Mhm.
the best.
He is played well. No, Mr. Ping's the best, but I think Dustin Hoffman brings Shifu a lot of weight, balancing comedy and
Yeah,
drama.
like yeah, I love because for one, you can tell that this is like a tortured soul. You can tell that this is someone who has been through a lot, but
Mm.
he's also very wise, and and like even if he takes some time and he still needs Uguay's tips, at least at first, he's still he's still doing his best to figure things out, and once he does, he's sticking with it, and even though he still has his great comedic moments, like I like in the second movie where he tells Poe, the day you were chosen to be the Dragon Warrior was the worst day of my life. I'm looking back and no, nothing tops it. It was the absolute worst. And it's like, yeah, that's great, thanks. And and just there's something about his way of fighting. There's something about the stuff he says, that the stuff he teaches. I just really love this character. He's great, and especially in the end of the third film, where when Poe says that he thinks he mastered Chi, at first Shifu was like, "Of course you did," but then he smiles and says, "Can you teach me?" Just the student has become the teacher. The teacher has become the student. I love Shifu, best character in this franchise. I'm willing to fight everyone over that. He's great.
Well, I fight you because I think Mr. Ping is actually the best character in the franchise.
Mr. Ping is definitely a worthy one as well, but I personally enjoy Shifu more, but that's just me. But
Oh,
I talked about Shifu and how much I love him, so we can talk about Mr. Ping. Mr. Ping is the
okay.
MVP and unsung hero of this
Yes.
franchise.
Well,
And
yes, he's
I
the
just want to
MVP.
say, before you say anything, I just want to say, one of my favorite moments from the third film is actually a joke involving him, where Poe asks him, "Wait, you can fly?" And he goes, "I'm a bird." I don't know, it got me.
Indeed. Well, I think
So
the thing is, Shifu and Mr. Ping are two sides of the same coin. They're both masters in their craft, who are technically single, and when someone needed their help, in this case a baby, they both stepped up to the plate. In the case of Mr. Ping, it was a baby that was in his radish crate that needed
yeah.
food and a home. In the case of Shifu, it was a doorstep baby left on him. And we also find out if you watch the supplemental shorts, Tigress was an orphan with emotional anger issues at the orphanage owing to abandonment issues. And Shifu adopted her after helping her teach some techniques that would help control her temper. But I think the difference
Yeah.
lies in the fact that while both men are stubborn and they have expectations that their children ultimately can't fulfill, Mr. Ping is more understanding of it. Because Mr. Ping, above all, loves Poe. And
Yeah.
even the noodle business.
And he does want, to use Poe in order to start selling noodles up, where the Kung Fu guys live. So, that's, we get some benefits from it.
Well, not just that. And that's
I
obviously
know,
there's.
no, I'm just joking.
But
I'm just joking because it's something
but I
they can
think
get.
also the fact that Shifu's always disappointed in those that he loves.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Ping isn't. Like, when Poe finally confesses that he loves Kung Fu and attempts to make a rocket chair, Mr. Ping isn't mad at him. He's like, it's okay, let's go home. Like, obviously, understanding his son was keeping the secret, but trying his best. And towards the end of the movie, even though he welcomes Poe back to the business by wrapping an apron around him while the villagers are evacuating, he says, I'm sorry it didn't work out. And I think it's because Mr. Ping has wisdom that came from adopting Poe. And it's one scene, secret ingredient. I think it's actually, he's not talking about the noodles. I think he was talking about Poe, because that came up because Poe said, I don't your son. And because he explained there's no secret ingredient. If you believe something is special, you make it special. And he just smiles at Poe. And when you watch the second movie, where he reveals that he adopted Poe, you realize he's not talking about those noodles. Because he said, it was the day I chose to make my soup without radishes. And to adopt you. So he was saying that Poe should know he's special. Because his father believes that he is. And at the end of the movie, he's not just proud of Poe for defeating Tai Lung, he's relieved he's alive and giving him a big hug for it. And I think it's Poe. Mr. Ping helps Poe uncover the secret of the Dragon Scroll just out of his love for his son. And I think that always stuck with me. And even Li Shan, Poe's father, mentions in the third movie that it was very selfless of Mr. Ping to adopt a child without any hesitation and to take care of him as his own son. And that's why Li Shan's never suspicious when Mr. Ping gets jealous and smuggles himself to join Poe and Li Shan at the Panda Village, which ends up being the right call. Because again, Mr. Ping...
also, that's another thing that, Ping could have totally just taken Poe's anger at Ling for lying to him and be like, you see, I am your father. I'm the father. But like, he actually comforts Ling. He actually tells them, listen, he's mad, he's confused, but he probably he still cares for you someplace. He still appreciates you as his biological father. And on that note, I just want to say, Poe has two dads. He turned out great. Suck on that, homophobes. But that's another story.
Indeed. But I also appreciate that he knows exactly what... At first, he's like, he thinks Poe is calling his dad at his Li Shan a monster, and Poe clarifies, no, I mean Kai. I've got to be prepared to fight him. And
yeah, that's another good point, yeah.
And I appreciate that Ping knows exactly what to do to make a peace offering. He makes fresh dumplings and offers them to Li Shan. At first says, I'm not hungry, but that he takes with you. Because Mr. Ping's cooking is that good.
Yeah, that is true.
And he also admits...
You want to I just want to give Wolf something to say.
Sorry, Wolf.
No, you're fine. You go right ahead. Like, there's not much I can add in regards to Mr. Ping. He is the GOAT.
Yes, the greatest of all time while being a goose.
Mm-hmm. The goose of all time.
The goose of all... Damn it! Okay, I just want to say, after this, you have no right to judge my jokes.
I will still judge. I will always judge.
Good, so you're a hypocrite. Wow. Anyway, go ahead, Jaya.
So, I think, and also in the conversation, he admits he lied to Poe. Obviously, Poe figured out he was adopted, but he admits he lied to Poe out of a selfish desire to protect him. And that he understands why Li Shan did what he did, because it's probably what he would have been tempted to do for Poe.
Yeah.
And so he understands, and he also admits he's jealous. He was worried that Li Shan would take Poe away from him, but he realized, Poe's not making us decide, and we don't have to. Just because he has another father doesn't mean I'm not a part of his life anymore. And he helped Li Shan come to the realization, if Kai's coming, they need to fight, and they need to help Poe and support him. Which leads to one of the greatest armors in the series, the double dad defense.
Yeah.
Because, and again, it
And
shows how Shifu and Mr. Ping are other sides of the same coin. Because Shifu gets turned into a zombie and chases after Poe, and Poe, because filial piety, says, "I can't attack my master," and cue a frying pan to the face for Shifu's zombie. And Mr. Pig says, "But I can,"
yeah.
and leads to one of both the silliest and most awesome moments.
No, I
By the
still
way,
say the
I like
silliest
how I
moment
like it when
was.
they
Go ahead.
when they just when they fight and they're like, "Watch out, Dad! Thanks, Dad! Do this, Dad!" The fact they call each other Dad is great. I love it.
I still say one of the silliest moments was in the beginning of the third, or close to the beginning of the third movie, when Poe meets his dad and like, I'm looking for my, I lost my son, and I lost my father. Like, oh, okay, well, we each wish I wish you luck in finding your son. I wish you luck in finding your dad. Bye, and just start to walk away. I thought that was a great joke.
It was.
Personally.
Someone actually made that into a meme with
sure.
Hiccup and Volk.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Because I think actually because Kung Fu Panda 3 was after How to Train Dragon 2, so yeah, there were comparisons. People even asked if Jeffrey Katzenberg has some sort of parent issues.
Yeah, and there's so much fun stuff.
Agreed.
So I think that
I don't think there's a lot to say.
I'm thinking what else there is to say, because we talked about Poe's arc. We haven't really talked about the 5. Or apart from Monkey not getting many lines.
Because honestly, all of them kind of serve their point as side characters. They have their funny moments, they have their supporting moments. Because honestly, besides Tigress, none of them really have a fleshed out character. They're just saying their lines, but
and that's fine. They don't have to be. Like, not every character needs to be fully fleshed out and have a full arc of anything. It's fine if they don't. There are moments where they introduce stuff for Tigress that make you want to say, I wish we could learn more about that. But it's not, like, necessary or important, right?
Yeah, I'm basically agree with this. All I'm gonna say is, I guess I will see you all next week when we cover the new show. I forgot its name. Damn it! The Dragon Knight. The Dragon Knight. That's what it's
Kung
called.
Fu Panda, the Dragon Knight.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess with that said, anything else to say before we wrap up?
Go watch Kung Fu Panda if you haven't. It's a really good series.
And if you haven't, why have you listened to all of these spoilers?
Actually, no, I take that back. Don't watch Kung Fu Panda. Go watch Kung Fu Rabbit. It's obviously a better movie.
And he judges.
How dare you? Also, listen to the soundtracks composed by John Powell and Hans Zimmer, both composed icons with film orchestra, and they're on YouTube, so you don't have an excuse, and you can see how they make the movie so much better.
Agreed.
Agreed. So I guess with that said, that's all for this episode of the Outcast. We hope you enjoyed. What are your thoughts about the Kung Fu Panda movies? Are you excited for the Dragon Knight? You can tell us all about it in the comment section below, on our Twitter, which is Berkcast with a capital B, capital C, and on our Tumblr, which is Berkcast Team. Jaya, where can people find you?
You can find me on Medium and on my personal website, and I'll see if I can come up with something to commemorate the premiere next week. That is, if I'm not too angry about the boys' season finale.
Wolf's reaction tells me a lot. You told me why, but
I've heard things.
Yeah.
I've heard
things. Feels the same way I do about that show.
Let's save it for later, shall we? Because we need to wrap this up. So Yeah, this was all for today. Take care. Talk to you soon. We'll see you all next time.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.